So thank you. As was mentioned, my name is Chris. I'm going to try to dual hand both of these things. First, I want to thank Paul and John for inviting me up. Anthony, I don't know where he's at, but also thanks to him. When we started talking about this a little while ago, I was super excited to have this opportunity, and they presented, the opening address. So I'm super honored and super appreciative. I would also like to thank a lot of you all for coming. This being the first of its kind, and I'm going to go into later on why things like this are important, but it shows an interest and it shows a passion for something that I think we all feel inside, and we're trying to turn into a legitimate, real industry. So welcome to my talk about video games. Let's see if this works. Sweet. So this is me. This is me and my little sister. I was born in 1981, which interestingly makes me 36 and conveniently makes me the average age of the video gamer in the United States. When I heard that stat, I thought there was no way that that could be correct, but it seems to be repeated and researched, so I'm going to run with it. But this is me and my little sister in the Philippines in the early to mid 80s. So my dad was in the Navy. I was a shy kid. We traveled around to the Philippines. We lived there for a few years and then Rhode Island. But I wasn't one that sort of went out and made friends easily. This is also where I was introduced to the ColecoVision. I don't know who here has ever played a ColecoVision. Yeah, I think that's about right. Switch hands here. Coleco was awesome. It had that like weird phone controller thing, but for some reason, I instantly connected with it. It was like the thing that just got me. And my sister and I were able to start playing games. And I played this thing to death, literally as it got melted in a thunderstorm and young Chris cried. But my dad bought this for me, and this was sort of the start of just something that like really captivated me, which transitioned into this. So when I came back from the Philippines and Rhode Island, this would have been 86, 87 with the introduction of this. This was the sort of big move for a lot of the industry. Many of the younger folks might not remember that in 83, the video game industry suffered a huge crash. And it was looking like that was going to be the end of it. Nintendo came in. They put their Nintendo seal of quality down there in the corner and were able to sort of build confidence back in. But more importantly, for folks like me, the Nintendo started this sort of schoolyard conversation. It's hard to believe as successful as the Nintendo was, it was still a relatively new thing. Oh, there's my team. Hey, guys. We were standing in the back. But this started schoolyard conversations. We could go to people's houses and play games. Like back, again, in the late 80s, early 90s, video games weren't really big. It was the nerd thing to do. Perhaps Dungeons & Dragons might have beat it out and the nerdosity factor, but not by much. So this started me being able to form connections and relationships with people, and it also started the industry growing rapidly. What came after this, as we started going into the PlayStation era, was the proliferation of video games across the world. So as successful as the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo might have been, the PlayStation to this point has sold over 100 million units. The other two are half that. At that point, you're beginning to see the start of a global trend. Shortly thereafter, the PlayStation 2 was released and is somewhere in the like 160, 170 million unit range, an insane sales number. And I don't know if that will ever be beaten. But the more important part is that by the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 time, it wasn't just a nerd thing anymore. It became a part of everyday culture. It was no longer a niche in society. Gaming, the concept of gaming, and the technology around gaming was beginning to go into every living room. Sony, with the PlayStation era, was a big part of that because they wanted to control the living room. That was their whole goal, which then led into Microsoft wanting to be involved in the gaming space. Obviously now, those two are the big players, except the Switch. Go Switch. Anybody? Yeah. All right. But I think what's interesting here, and why I'm sort of telling you my backstory about the industry, is that I think in a lot of ways it mirrors the industry as a whole, and it mirrors the experiences of a lot of you. Perhaps finding yourself uncertain in what you want to do, not really sure how to connect with people, a little shy. I'm an introvert at heart, so I would much rather go and sit on my beautiful green velvet couch than go out and connect and network with people. But these provided me opportunities to sort of challenge myself at home and then interact with people as I went out and was connecting with folks. So now things are a little bit different. The number quoted here, 100 billion, we're about to break 100 billion, whether it's this year or early next year. As a global industry, that is a huge number. I always pull this out. This is my favorite stat. So when you look at movies and music, this is a loaded question, but who thinks the video game industry is bigger than music globally? All right. Me. Bigger than movies globally. All right. So just for comparison's sake, there you go. The video game industry is almost twice as large as the two combined at this moment. It's a gigantic industry, and it composes software development, hardware development, and a whole other thing. We're in the School of Communication, so you've got PR, marketing, streaming, esports is becoming big, community management is becoming big. So all of these areas are impacting the global trends that are going on with the industry. And that doesn't even really count VR. VR itself is kind of like a segment of gaming. Right now is about $7.5–8 billion. That's the current estimate towards the end of 2017. It's projected to be over $75 billion by 2021. Like, that is an insane growth trajectory. How many folks in here are messing around with VR or want to get involved with VR at some point? Awesome. So I'm going to pull this up. I use this at my TEDx talk, so some of you might be familiar with it. But the reason I'm pulling this up is because I think this is emblematic of a period that we're having right now. So for the older folks in the audience, not to call you out, this was representative of a new form of music that very, very few people got. But those that got it were extremely excited about it. And the small people that got it, that could realize how to capitalize on it, were the ones that went out and changed the world. So while the rest of society was worried about somebody's hips shaking on TV, there was a small contingent of miscreants and weirdos that were trying to figure out, how do you bring this rock and roll thing to the audience at large? Obviously, we know who won, right? We know where history took us. But I think that's where we are with gaming right now. As large as gaming is, and in a cultural standpoint, we're still sort of breaking this barrier. I call it the games tax. So at Multivarious, we do a lot of development. We develop our own games, No Mercy. Cody is wearing the shirt today, it seems. But we also develop stuff for clients. So we use the Microsoft Connect. I will take the best developers in Ohio moniker. I don't know about the Midwest, but I appreciate the compliment, John. But we do tons of stuff in education and in healthcare and in finance. And we use the term games very broadly here. So it's one thing to sort of look at games as a purely entertainment form, a form of escapism. But really, games are so broad and so powerful that they can change the world. And us here being together, and I'm not going to have the longest speech. I think I've only got 8 slides, because I think it would be a missed opportunity if, having all of these passionate, dedicated people in the room, we don't have a chance to have like a really good dialogue, to ask questions and to go back and forth. But that's going to all change, right? So this is a photo from GDEX, the expo we throw. Time is going to take care of a lot of. So a lot of the people who aren't sure about games, who have never played games, I always use the Les Wexner example, the richest man in Ohio. Les, I'd be willing to get. I don't know him at all. I've only met him once. But my guess is he's probably not at home playing video games most of the time. Maybe he played something like Miss Pac-Man in the 80s. But he has younger kids and he has grandkids. When I talk about games, and people like Les, who are sort of instrumental in moving the state of Ohio forward in a lot of business directions, we don't need people like him to play games or to love games. We just sort of need them to appreciate the industry and what it is. My comparison is always the ballet. I'm not a big fan of the ballet. I'm not likely to go out to a ballet thing. If somebody invites me, I'll be like, yeah, I'll go. My fiance and I will go to the Nutcracker every so often. But I appreciate the hard work and dedication and athleticism that goes into ballet. Like, those people are putting in a tremendous amount of effort and force to make something that is beautiful and creative and constructive. If we can get the rest of Ohio and the Midwest to appreciate that the way that we appreciate that, then I think we can make some big strides. So earlier this year, I went to GDC. the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. Who here has been to that before? Sweet. So I would recommend heavily going to that if you have not. I met a guy through a contact, and my friend was like, okay, you're out in San Francisco, you've got to meet this guy. He's like the leader in this maker movement, and we're part of the Idea Foundry in Columbus. And he's like, you need to talk to this guy. So I went and I talked to him, and I had no idea that he had any real connection to GDC at all. We were just meeting in a hotel lobby, just kind of chatting about maker movements and creating these spaces so that people can come and be creative and learn, physical skills and design skills and computer skills. And he talks to me and he's like, yeah, I remember the first GDC when it was just the 12 of us sitting in a basement. And I'm like, that's insane. That's insane. GDC had 40,000 people this year. And I think that is reflective of sort of every little part that we have going on in our industry. On the way back from GDC, I started thinking about a couple things. When we started Multivarious 6 years ago, I was coming off of a job in healthcare, which is sort of my background. That job at the time, when I was finishing my grad school and talking, that was going to be like the perfect job for me, like the best job. It involved technology. I was supposed to look at uses of like, it doesn't matter what the technology was, what is the healthcare use of it? How can it be applied to patients or doctors or hospitals or whatever? And the guy I was talking to who ran the department, he was like, think of this like a startup. We're going to be lean, we're going to be fast, we're going to be efficient, we're going to make decisions. If any of you are familiar with the Ohio State University, none of those words are true in general. I see some heavy shaking heads there. So that all sounded great to me. I was right out of grad school, 2 grad degrees in healthcare. I was ready to rock and roll. I love technology. I'm sort of a weirdo, so I like looking at things in a different way. We had one meeting the first week I was on the job. We didn't have another meeting for 4 months. A year and a half later, I dreaded going into work every day. It was the worst. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't know what the department was supposed to be doing. The lean, efficient decision-making was not happening. And Thanksgiving of the year, about a year and a half into it, Thanksgiving, I was told that I was going to be fired. And I was like, shit. And they're like, you've got about 2 weeks of severance. I'm like, okay, great. So I'm going to be fired, not now, but Christmas. Even better, right? So I was absolutely devastated. That was like just this terrible moment. I weighed more than I ever had in my life. I was super stressed. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I was sitting around and I'm like, you know what? I've been doing this multivarious thing on the side. It was sort of full-time healthcare. Maybe I could do that. But also, that doesn't make any money. Like, we've made $0 in that. I was like, maybe I should actually get a real job. So I'm like, I'm not going to decide until after Christmas. I'm just going to kind of talk to people, make some connections, see what I can do. After Christmas, I talked to family. I talked to Tina. We had a little intro opening about entrepreneurship in here. And I know Josh, I don't know where he is going to talk about the entrepreneur life. Anybody who's interested in doing a startup, doing a new business, living the entrepreneur world, it's incredibly, incredibly exciting, but it's also terrifying. It's just like horror filled. But, yeah, but that seemed like the way I had been going. Originally, when I went to do something in Multivarious, is because I had these ideas, these desires to make apps and games and to interact with people. I wasn't married at the time, don't have kids. I didn't really have any big obligations other than a crushing student loan debt, but we're not going to worry about that for the moment. I decided I was going to do Multivarious full-time, and that started on January 1st, and we just started doing it. A couple months later, we started getting clients. I brought on Tom, who's over there, as our first hire. Fast forward again, back to my plane ride coming out from GDC, I was thinking about those moments, thinking about the early days of the company and of entrepreneurship. And it became pretty obvious early on that we were not going to get the support that we needed as a small business. There was no investors around town that were going to provide us. And I talked to all the investment groups. Banks looked at us like a friggin' joke. Our business model was just like mind-blowing for them. And there really wasn't any strong sort of relationships and ways that you would need to build an industry. We were hosting and part of a community group, COG, which is now over 1,300 members. And we started thinking about what do we need to be successful? And I was like, we have to start planting the seeds now for our own success. These are the things that we are going to need to grow both Multivarious and the community, and thus everybody else that has a part of it. And it's been a slow growth. As I was coming back from GDC and I was thinking about these things and writing them down and thinking about the sessions that we were involved in around education, and it just became obvious that like we were like 5 years ahead of pretty much any of these other states that were at GDC. In the education summit that I was there, like they were having conversations about how do you interact with healthcare companies, something we've been doing for 5 years. How do you work hand in hand with universities, which is something we are doing right now. It seemed like they were having these struggles that, unbeknownst to us, we had just been working our way through. I was on the plane, and I had forgot to preload videos into my iPad, so I didn't really have anything to listen to or whatever. And I opened up my laptop, and I realized that I had a whole bunch of Steve Jobs videos that I had downloaded like years ago, and I didn't really listen to. So I popped one of them on, and he was talking about why he thought Silicon Valley was what Silicon Valley is, the reasoning behind it. Let me check my time. Looking good. Okay. And he sort of tied it down to three things. He said, you need a strong educational system that can bring in talent and train talent and get people excited. You need a strong infrastructure. In this case, it would be a tech infrastructure, but it could be retail or manufacturing or whatever. But you need things like access to good internet, access to the services that are going to be required, cloud services, or in this case in games, we have a proliferation of things like Unity and the Unreal Engine, which is providing us opportunities that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago for smaller studios. And you need financing. So I was thinking about those things. I was like, well, I can't control the education system, right? Like I can work with people like John, I can work with OSU and Miami and Shawnee State, but I can't walk into OSU and be like, you need to start a games program and do this now. Like that's not how it works. So I started writing down ways that we could interact with universities and to start working with them. The next thing was the finance. Same thing. I can't go into a bank and be like, you should give us loans. Multivarious has one loan that we got from Huntington, which took us forever. It took us like 4 months to get that thing worked out. It was like this atrociously painful process, but we finally did it. But the second thing is the infrastructure. That is the piece that we were empowered to handle. So when you look at something like GDEX here, nobody stopped us from doing GDEX. Our community group 5 years ago was sitting around being like, we should do something that is a way to showcase what Ohio developers were working on. And everybody was talking about it. And so I was like, you know what, screw it, let's do it. We keep talking about this thing, let's just do it. First year, who came to the first OGDE, just out of curiosity? Nice. We've got a fellow co-founder here as well. We did it at the Ohio Union. It was just going to be a small thing. We had a couple like smaller rooms. I think we had 12 exhibitors at the time. A couple people wanted to speak. Virtually no sponsors. And it was one of those things like I always joke, like in my mind, if we had gotten 50 or 100 people to come to it the first year, like that would have been a success for me. It was going to be in September, about 2 weeks before the first one. We just started getting blown up with emails who people wanted to exhibit and sponsor and speak. And so we were sitting around, we're like, well, we're 2 weeks away from this event. People have made decisions. They've made travel plans. What should we do? I was like, all right, let's just, this is probably not going to happen again, like this period. So we pushed it back. We pushed it back 3 months to December, which also happened to coincide with the worst blizzard we had that year. But we ended up going from 12 exhibitors to 33. Another cool thing that happened is that we got contacted by a woman at COSI. And she had come because she had heard of it and she wanted to know something about it. And she sent me an email and she's like, we have to have this at COSI next year. I'm like, sounds good to me. I'd grown up with COSI. It's the Science Center in Columbus, for those who don't know. It had always been like a really cool place to go when you were a kid. But I mean, I had no idea how to do anything there. And we went and we talked, and it turned out COSI didn't either. COSI had never done an event like that before at their place. So we sort of learned together. Second year, 1,500 people. Third year, 2,500 people. We're at the 5th year now at the convention center. We're hoping to break 4,000. That's our ambitious goal. But even if we got 1,000 or 2,000 people to come to this thing, this is an exciting opportunity. I go to a lot of other cities and states, around the country, around the Midwest. I was just in Chicago last month for one of their larger events, and I don't want to bash Chicago. A lot of good people there, and they come and support us, but their community does not function anything like ours. Our community, and when I say my community, I'm talking about the Columbus one, but we also have the Cleveland community here. We have Youngstown and Cincy and Athens, the UGDA folks. What's interesting about Ohio that I began to notice recently, particularly after GDC, is that we actually talk to each other. All the other states that were at GDC, that were involved in these sessions, they don't communicate with each other in any way. So when we throw something like this and we have people from all over the state, we have the ability to share resources and communicate and have strategic plans and visions, which for whatever reason, particularly in Chicago is a very clear delineation about what is Chicago, and everything else outside of that doesn't matter, even if you're like a suburb of Chicago. And I'm not quite sure why they've had that issue, but fortunately for us, it's something we haven't had to face. Now, going back to GDEX, I went to BitBash in Chicago, their big thing. It was nowhere near on the size or scale of what we're doing. And I'm saying that not to toot our horn as the lead organizers of GDEX, but I'm saying that as a sort of referendum to all of you and to a thanks to all of you for supporting it. We have 70,000 square feet of expo floor this year at GDEX. That's not going to fill itself. It's been filling itself because people are excited to be a part of it and are spreading the word about it, and you know, showing up year after year, every year with these exciting things. And I think GDEX is a lot about this too. It's about fun. It's about people coming and getting together and having an exciting passion. When you're out in San Francisco, you can just say what you do. I can say I'm in video games and like people get it. I don't have to spend the next 10 minutes explaining what the video game industry is to people. And I think that's super exciting. And then the other infrastructure thing that I sort of latched onto is that when we were starting Multivarious, we didn't have any of the resources. Like, how do I make a non-disclosure agreement? When I interact with a client, like, are there provisions in there that I need to have? How do I do my taxes? I was like, oh, it turns out you need like 4 tax ID numbers. Who knew, right? So we started thinking about ways to sort of streamline that. All of the bumps and like issues that we've had, we began to put all of those people together into a group, and we created something called The Sandbox, which is a collaborative community space in Columbus. We have some people there, the Able Gamers charity, we host out of there. We also have a bunch of other individuals and game makers that are there, but it's all part of creating this infrastructure and this platform, because at the end of the day, everybody in this room, everybody in the industry, we're all gonna need to support each other. We're all gonna need to help each other get to that next step so that when one of us is successful, whether it's Multivarious or Max Gaming or whoever, we can take that and reinvest it back into helping everybody else. So all of those thoughts got condensed in this ride home from GDC, this flight home. And I started working on a proposal. And I started thinking about, okay, well, what do we actually need to make an industry here? I mean, we've talked about the infrastructure, we talked about the education, obviously the finance, right? But like, I can't finance anything right now, and I don't know if there's anybody in here that can. Please see me after this talk. But I started thinking about it, you know what? We are doing something in Ohio that nobody else is doing. And I'm trying to not be hyperbolic here, but I literally mean that. It doesn't look like anybody in Michigan, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Kentucky is doing something on the scale that we are doing right now. So what does that mean? And I began to have some conversations with city council. I began to have some conversations with Franklin County, and I began to have conversations with state representatives in Ohio. And it became more and more obvious that if we can coalesce this work, and it's not the work that I'm doing or that any individual is doing, but the work that we're all doing, into one sort of strong, cohesive vision, then I think there might be a way for us to get support from the city, from the state, from schools like this. For GDEX, our biggest sponsors are higher education, have been every year. Most of them, particularly OU, is one that comes in ready to rock and roll every year and support GDEX. If we keep doing those kind of things, then I think we can get people excited. And if we keep doing these kind of things where we can talk and strategize about it, we can begin to make the connections and get the decision makers. Fast forward into the future here, I think we can get to a point, and some of you may have read some of the, oh no, that was a rookie mistake, man. All right, cool. So fast forward in the future, we are looking at creating a 5-year program for a $10 million investment into the city. Combination right now is heavily the city of Columbus, but we're beginning to work with other areas, including Cleveland, Cincy, and Athens. But a $10 million investment from a state and city budget cycle is not that much. But from a new nascent industry, that's a big deal. New Zealand's government, over the past 5 years, has been putting money into their system. And I just read an article that came out, I believe, this year about how their industry, their gaming industry, has grown so fast that they now don't have enough talent to fill those spots. But that's New Zealand. They're like out in the middle of nowhere. They got Australia. That's cool. But like we are in the middle of one of the best tech hubs in the world. So I think as we begin to progress, and what I'm excited about, and getting close to ending because I'd rather talk about it than talk to you about it, is we are on the precipice of a really big turn in what could be this industry. Who here is students at OU? Nice. Who here is graduating like this year? All right. So maybe I can't help you all. But maybe the years 1, 2, and 3, when you graduate, there will be a place that you can go, a place that you can take your piece of paper and apply to get a job. Or maybe you can start your own business, and with the skills and the support that you have here, you begin to build that business without all the bumbling and the bumps and bruises that we have had. So that's sort of my economic argument of it. It's a giant industry. We are poised to take position of it. We are doing things that no other city or state in the Midwest is doing. But I also think there's a more sort of fundamental part of what we're doing. For everybody who was like the nerdy kid and the Nintendo gamer and the people that are trying to find those connections, we see this stuff in our community all the time. This is a statement from a GDEX volunteer a few years ago. And this is something that in the investment talks and the public support talks and stuff, I want to make sure is captured, because this isn't the only one. The first year we had a person who had emailed me wanting to showcase. And I was like, I'm sorry, man, we're out of space. He was a high school student. And he's like, well, if I show up, can you do something? I was like, I don't know. Like, we're super packed. I don't know what we can do. First year, I'm running around like a crazy person, as I always am. And Tina comes up to me. He's like, there's this kid out in the hallway, and you have to talk to him. I'm like, okay. So I'll go and talk to him. And she's like, his name's Emmett. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember talking to him over email. In our email exchanges, it was just like, hey, I want to exhibit, do you mind if I show up and maybe there's a place? And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't realize the logistics of that sentence. This kid packed up his desktop computer, his laptop, his keyboard, his mouse into a backpack and took the bus from the east side of Columbus, which is not an easy bus ride, during a blizzard to, on the off chance that he would be able to showcase at the first expo. I talked to him for a couple minutes, and I went to Tina. I was like, I don't care where the hell it is. You find this kid a place to showcase. And high school student out on the east side, that was his first sort of chance to show something he had been working on. The game was rudimentary. It didn't work very well, but it didn't matter. It was a platform for him to be successful. Last year, we had a volunteer who contacted us, and she was like, I'm looking for 2 tickets, one for my son and one for myself, because I can't, I'd like to volunteer because I can't afford 2 tickets. I was like, well, we'll just give you the 2 tickets. That's not a big deal. And she's like, no, I want to volunteer. I want my kid to be able to sort of go around and experience, and I'll help out. I was walking around, crazy again, as I always do, and there was this one woman, and she was like super excited and passionate. She was directing people and had a lot of energy, and I kind of like walked past her, and I stopped, and I turned back around like, what's your name? And she said her name was Trishon. I was like, I just want to say you're doing an awesome job. And that was the woman who had contacted us over the email. So we have all these little stories that I want to sort of end on that note, because I don't want to get caught in the investment and the public support. I think the academic and politics talk can happen. But for everybody here who's getting started in this, every time you hit one of those barriers, and I think everyone who owns a game company in this room knows what those barriers are. Every time you want to stop, every time you're just like, oh my God, we have so much to do, you can think about those moments and just keep pushing through it. GDEX is in 2 weeks, and I don't think we're anywhere close to being done yet, but we're gonna work and try to get everything done, because I think things like GDEX are super important. I'm being mentioned by Cody to also show that we have an Ohio Discord channel for game developers. So multivarious.com/Ohio Game Dev as a plug. And then of course, GDEX is thegdex.com. And Sandbox is thesandbox.space. I didn't know .space was a domain name, but it is. And just because I was sort of dared on this, but my fiance said that I wasn't allowed to put baby and my dog into my presentation, so I took that as a dare, and there you go. She just got a haircut. So I'm going to stop because I would like to hear questions and have a conversation on this, since this is the first one of its kind. Like, this is a one-of-a-kind opportunity. Hopefully, like Paul was mentioning, maybe in 10 years we'll look back and this will be a giant summit, and we'll be like, wow, we did something really, really cool today. So thank you. I appreciate your time, and I'm going to hang around for a bit for questions or comments if you have any. I think I have time, right? All right, cool. Any questions at all? There's microphones there, but. Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. So volunteers for GDEX, I gotta do another plug. If you want to attend GDEX and you want to volunteer, we'll give you a free weekend pass, thegdex.com/apply. So there's still a couple spots left for GDEX volunteers. Who here has gone to GDEX before again? Who here has volunteered at GDEX? No, you don't count. All right, so I would suggest volunteering. It's a ton of fun, and you meet a lot of people, I have been told. GDEX is September 29th through October 1st, and we have a dev day on Friday where we pull in a whole bunch of sort of top-tier professional speakers to do in-depth sessions about stuff. It is an all-weekend STEM learning experience. It is, yeah. It's at the Columbus Convention Center. And I just got the email today about a new block of hotel rooms for discount if anybody needs them. So we'll put that up some point here. Should I just pull up the list? Am I on the interwebs? Is the interwebs free? I forget it. Too much trouble. So we've got speakers from PlayStation, Microsoft. We got some big YouTubers. Jesse Cox is a game YouTuber. We have the McElroys, which do a podcast, my brother, and me. I think we're at 45 speakers, 46. And we've got like 62 sessions going on. So it's hard for me to sort of overestimate how cool this event is. Obviously, I'm the one hosting it, so maybe I'm a little biased. But it just doesn't really exist in the Midwest. Who here's gone to like a PAX before? Got a couple PAXs? Yeah, so you know that if you want to go to any of the big conferences, you have to do it out on the coasts. And unfortunately, that's not tenable for a lot of people. So. Okay. And he's doing software development and programming. This is something that we last would be interested in doing, like get some information on it to get consider for your center. Yeah. So that gentleman right there, Cody, I think is going to get you a card. Yeah, definitely reach out to us. I'm sure that that's how we actually found out about this was from his instructor. Okay. So we had special information on today, which is great. Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you.
So, it's pretty low. There we go. So, having seen the community grow in the way it is, to kind of help further expand the community, do you have any recommendations for what people might do if they want to start a business? Like some of those first steps in saying, here are your pitfalls, here's the best way that I would recommend in moving forward.
Yeah, so for those in the Columbus Central Ohio region, coming to the sandbox, I think, is a good step. For those not in the region, we are looking at creating sort of a set of services that will help with a lot of those things. And then one of the conversations we've also been having is maybe doing streaming talks with people in the industry and being able to post those. So that's definitely something that we are trying to do, because a lot of the pitfalls everybody shares. And if you could just let people know and give them a heads up, it would save a lot of time. Where are you from?
Here, actually. Just graduated about 3 months ago.
Oh, nice. Well, congrats. Have you started your own company yet?
No, I have not.
But you're thinking about it?
I'm part of a couple of startups. I just know a bunch of friends that have had that same thought on their mind.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. And I know being here, and I don't want to speak for Tech Growth Ohio, but that would be a good connection to talk to. In Central Ohio, the Tech Growth equivalent doesn't really fund anything that we do. But I feel like you might have some other avenues in this area for startup growth.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, if I could make a shameless plug.
Please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Strauss. I'm the director of the Innovation Center, which is the region's startup incubator. So we assist people that have ideas for companies. And coming up to the last person's question, I want to provide an opportunity. We have Startup Weekend. So that is sponsored by a lot of the folks who sponsored this event. And Startup Weekend is a global opportunity for people to take an idea from Friday night and meet people to help them grow the idea. There's mentors, coaches, including John Bowditch and other folks from Tech Growth Ohio and from the entrepreneurial ecosystem, not only in Southeast Ohio, but from around the state. So that is coming up right here in Athens, hosted at the Innovation Center, again, sponsored by a number of different colleges and partners across the region. It's October 13th through 15th. And you can just go to athens-oh.up.co. There's also flyers next door. And I'll leave my cards over there. So Startup Weekend, it's a great opportunity to come in and actually work on an idea and make those connections so you can get some business advice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Let's keep those kind of things going. Like, I am personally interested in hearing people's comments and thoughts, particularly some of the students. Like, what are you thinking? You're about to start. We're beginning to be old hat here in this industry. I want to hear what you all are thinking, what you are wanting to do.
Let me just mention again to students, the Center for Entrepreneurship is here to help you do exactly that. If you're not sure what the next step is in building a business, come see us over in Copeland Hall. But my question for you, Chris, is I've been an entrepreneur in many different industries. I ask this of anybody. Do you think it will be easier to attract capital, not because you may be generating cash flow or revenues, but will the overall prominence of games make some of these investors and the growing marketplace, the example the public companies are making, will that make it any easier for you to have these conversations with potential investors, or if you're generating some revenue with banks?
Yeah, I think without a doubt, I think our biggest challenge right now is it's a perceptual one. It's not an economics one. It's not a business one. People like to pretend that games are risky, and they are. Like it's a risky endeavor to get in them. But if you create them efficiently and strategically, and you market them wisely, you can make money on them. Every game doesn't have to be a Minecraft, but you can make a sustainable game on it. Games are no more risky than like biotech, and Ohio is dumping tons of money into biotech to get like a stage 1 biotech project. You're talking $5-10 million just out the gate to get anything sort of usable and past the FDA. So for $5-10 million, I think we all in this room could make some pretty kick-ass games. So I think the big issue is a perceptual one. If we start to see more and more people begin to maybe perhaps broaden their understanding of games. When I use the term games, I use it very broadly, but I also use it specifically because I want to affect that mental change in people. I want them to just keep hearing the repetition of it over and over again so that they'll begin to see that there actually is value. It's not just games for healthcare. It's not just games for education. It's games from the entertainment side are big enough at $100 million. So I think that's pretty good. And we're gonna have some speakers later today. They're gonna talk about esports and things like that. And then hopefully as investors or the public sector begin to put money into those systems, they'll become more and more used to it. Silicon Valley's got a ton of money flying around, but they're not making the best picks all the time. You know, it's just that they have money. And to be honest, also, the Midwest just has a risk aversion to things, which is something that we're going to have to get over. Just from your question real fast, what is you said you had an entrepreneurship certification? Is that what would that entail, just for my knowledge?
The certificate in entrepreneurship is open to non-business. We have courses that would count not only for your major, but for the entrepreneurship certificate. So it's for people that aspire to work for themselves or perhaps be part of a new business, want to get their feet wet educationally, don't want to double major.
Do you have to be a full-time student to pursue it? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. I think you're the only school in the state that offers that? That's the first one I've heard of. Well, we'll just make large blanket statements and not worry about backing it up. Yeah, exactly.
I have a comment that I'd like to turn into a question. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. I think about, like, how are we going to change this perceptual problem, which we've all been working on, for a long time. But one of the things I think is kind of outside of the games industry, because we're working to make games and to make supporting services for game developers. But I also think that, game developers go into the industry because they want a life that's a little bit more fun. Like, you're like, well, I think about this myself. I don't really want to make business software. I think making games is fun. I want to be part of a fun culture. And when I look at least Columbus, I can only speak for Columbus, because I live there, but I've looked at, what kind of fun things that are kind of like appealing to game developers are springing up. And we have things that, I think in Columbus we have like 4 barcades now, and we have 2 board game parlors. We have 2 parkour gyms. And I'm like, wow, these are things that, just a couple of years ago you might have heard about, like on the coast, out in California or whatever, but it's like in Columbus, and I know like up in Cleveland, they're doing a barcade thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, like, this
I
is
think we
exciting.
have 2 of like the 13 or 15 Killer Queen cabinets in the United States are in
That's
Columbus.
awesome. And we have like 7 Escape the Room games. Like,
Yeah.
there's all these like games.
Is there a barcade
related
in Athens?
Every place is a barcade.
Okay. Just saying. You look for demand, solve a problem. Just saying.
So to turn this into a question, I'm just wondering, from your travels and kind of looking around, what kind of sense do you get beyond just the ones I've mentioned of like fun things that are gonna make Ohio be a fun place to be, for people that are game developers and want more of a fun and kind of exciting lifestyle?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit on a lot of stuff. There are a lot of ancillary things that surround games and gaming. And so again, you had barcades as a thing. We've had electrical engineers and industrial designers that like, they get excited about wanting to make a console. They don't care about the software necessarily. But I think that's part of, I was in an article earlier, and I said that we're going to make Columbus the next Silicon Valley of video games or whatever. And one of my friends was like, it was a great article, but like, can we stop calling Columbus the next Silicon Valley of whatever? And like, can we just be us? I was like, yeah, we can. But like, what is Columbus? Like, what is Ohio? I think we're having an issue of figuring out like what we are. And ultimately, to lead back, I think, into your question, is if we became a place that was known for doing like creative, fun, interesting things. Like when you think of like Austin, for example, like a lot of the stuff that comes to mind is their music and art scene, and they have a real good food scene and stuff too. That's part of the culture that's ingrained in them. When you think about Columbus or Athens or Cleveland, I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. Like I love Columbus, but like I honestly don't know what Columbus is by one word or one sentence. If it was up to me, I would want to make Ohio that fun, creative space that's known for like churning out awesome ideas. So who here knows what Imgur is? It's the image hosting site. Who here that has their hands up knew that that was created by Athens kids?
Oh, wow.
So yeah, popped out. They made this thing. It was supposed to be like a gift to Reddit. Wasn't anything going on in Ohio. They left, and now it's $1 billion company. Like that is a lost opportunity for us, because we need to maintain that, and that comes like from everybody. You need the creative, talented people who can make the things, but then you need the schools and the cities that can support those kind of activities.
Hello.
Hello.
I am a junior-ish programming student down at Shawnee State, and my fiance is making a game like actively, and I've been taking some business classes to hopefully help him later on as development moves forward to sell it.
Nice.
So I'm wondering what you think I should be looking into on the business end. Like what should I be researching on my own time about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've actually been meaning to, and I just hadn't gotten around to it, making a talk that's like the 10 most important first things to do for a small business. Do you have like an LLC or anything created yet? No. Okay, so that would be a first one. Yeah. Connect with, Cody, do you have a card on her you can give her?
I think we've got your card actually.
Okay, cool. So connect with us within the sandbox. One of the goals of the initial phase of the sandbox is that when you have like an artist and a programmer coming together, that's what they're good at, right? That's what their skill set is. So why should they be spending time making contracts and doing sales? And I sort of joke, I left healthcare to make video games. I spend 90% of my week not making video games because I'm doing all this other stuff. So if you contact us, we can get you connected to Ohio-based attorneys, accountants, those kind of things that can provide you some answers. But yeah, a good thing is to get an LLC. I think it's $75 in Ohio. It's super cheap. Then you'll get your tax ID. You need to get a tax ID number. But those kind of things will help sort of cement your organization. Then once you have that, then you can get a business bank account. And all of those like little steps are just something that when they're in place and you're ready to use them, you can start. And like it's the worst thing, for example, to be like, oh, it's tax season. And you're like, I was supposed to get a tax ID number for this. Like I have my federal one. I didn't know I needed a state one, And then all of a sudden you're racking up fees, or the state's yelling at you for something, which we may or may not have done in our early days. But yeah, those would be my first suggestions. And then later on, if you want to chat, I'd be more than happy to go into details about some of the stuff. But yeah, I would say get an LLC, tax ID number, bank account, and then make sure that you get at least a couple, like a good NDA. And if you're going to start doing any kind of contract work or whatever, make sure you understand how to formulate a good agreement.
Thank you so much.
And that goes for anybody making anything. Like nobody gives a crap when like the thing's not making money and it's just a bunch of people in a room having fun. But as soon as that thing picks off, like, if Notch was working with a partner and $2 billion were on the line, all of a sudden it's going to become really unclear how much each person participated. So make sure you have those conversations and ideally get them down on paper as early as you can.
I'm a junior in high school from Cleveland, Ohio, and
nice.
One day I'm interested in owning my own business.
Did you come down here for this? Mm-hmm. Nice. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm here with my school, Beaumont. I've always been an introvert, so public speaking and trying to talk in front of large groups of people have been hard for me, and sometimes I get really nervous. And
me too.
It's bad. And I wanted to know, how did you gain courage and challenge yourself to enter the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, so I mean, like in high school, for example, like the idea of doing public speaking was the worst. So I definitely feel you. I think it comes down to two basic things. One is know what you're talking about. Like if you're excited and you know what you're talking about, it's a lot easier because then it becomes less about, okay, here's my talk. And like I don't have any notes or anything for my talk because I know what I want to say. And I believe what I'm saying, like I'm passionate about it. So when you have that information, it becomes less about following a speech and more about sort of passionately presenting it. And the second thing is sort of the simplest and silliest is like, do it a lot. Just start practicing. So like when I was up here walking back and forth and talking, outside of some of the faces I knew, the rest of you were just blobs. Like it's just like a sheet of nothing. And that way I don't get distracted and I don't worry about all the people that are staring at me. And then over time, if you keep doing it, you'll start to notice that you're just becoming more and more confident at it. I would suggest, it's a little late now, but I would suggest applying to be a speaker at GDEX. GDEX is a platform to help smaller developers and smaller people go and give a talk. I'm sure there's something that you could give a 20-minute talk on or a 15-minute talk that is meaningful to you, that's passionate for you. And that would give you an opportunity to do it in front of like-minded people who are there to support you. Nobody's going to be mean. Nobody is going to, yell at you or whatever. Like that, they all want to see everybody there succeed. So I think those are the two easiest kind of pieces of advice. And the fact that you asked that question, I think, is pretty good. So yeah, Tina's line is "fake it till you make it." She tells me that all the time, which is true because we don't know what we're doing. We just keep bumbling around.
Quick comment and then a question. As a fellow introvert who used to be scared to death of public speaking, I highly recommend finding a local Toastmasters club. They are a great resource to be able to do that kind of practice in an environment that feels safe. It's been a tremendous resource for me.
That's a great suggestion.
Question, for a group that's looking to start up, that they're just getting started, what are the typical kinds of resources they need that they're to seek out? Is it capital or hardware? Is it knowledge and expertise in areas they're not familiar with? What are in that just beginning stage of, hey, we want to get this idea off the ground, what are
So you mean like a startup business?
Either start a business or even just a couple of people who are looking, hey, let's get this idea moving. What do people typically look for resources they don't realize is going to be something that they really need?
So I mentioned previously some ideas to get started. I think spending time designing whatever you're going to do, like just sitting down and whiteboarding out stuff. I'm not talking about, don't program, don't spend a lot of time making art. I'm a big fan of what I call vibe reels, which is you just find content that sort of gets the message across of what you're trying. So if you're going to make like a space game, for example, like steal shit from Star Trek and Star Wars and those things, and just put them into a reel with a soundtrack on it, so that every time you're going to start a design meeting, you can watch it, and it can be 30 seconds, a minute. It doesn't have to be long, and it kind of gets everybody in the same frame of mind. And then start writing stuff down. Always get things on paper. Do paper prototyping.
To redirect you, I meant as a resources type of question. Like, what are the kinds of resources that...
Oh, like where to go for resources?
Yeah. Or not where to go for them, but what are the kinds of resources that people need to do this, to get started?
That's the $1 million question. So every city has got their own little thing. So like Columbus has like ECDI and all these other things that claim to help you with resources. But we never found them, I personally never found them particularly valuable. So in this area, I'm not knowledgeable enough, so that would be something to ask. But I would think to sort of, talk to Paul. But I would get together with your team and figure out what your strengths and your weaknesses are and what you want to accomplish. And then you can start to identify, like if you have someone on your team that's good at business, for example, maybe start to have them think about what this group is going to look like in a year or 2 years. If you have somebody that's good at the development side, they can begin to get the resources, whether that's getting something like Unity to start developing on and getting access to YouTube videos for learning. I don't know. I think that's a very tricky question. I don't know if I have the best answer for it.
No, I'm just curious about where... Yeah. Just want to get an idea of what the kinds of resources that people want.
I mean, there really isn't, like there was no place that we went there was like, oh, you can have this and this and this. Like we bounced around, we met friends, people advocated. Even the convention center, us being able to get to the convention center, typically they don't let sort of like new people, they have to kind of work their way in. The director at Experience Columbus vouched for us, and that was why we got in. So, because Columbus is a mess right now. There's like no big convention spaces outside the convention center. So it was all just like fighting to try to get space, and we got shoved in there because we knew somebody. And then there's always like little stuff like, you're going to need money. Like, well, I assume you're going to need money. I don't know anything about your personal finances. But you're going to want to find a way to either, there's always equipment to buy, software to buy, things like that. One of the biggest things to success is ask for money when you have money. Banks are much more likely to give you money. Investors are much more likely to support you if you're not like 2 weeks away from going broke. So ask for money when you have money is one of my big things. I don't know if that was helpful, but hopefully.
It's a good start. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's good. I'm a student at Cuyahoga Valley Career Center, and I was wondering if there's any software you'd recommend to start playing around with developing stuff.
Sure. The big one's Unity. You can download it. Was it unity3d.com, I think? But if you Google Unity, that has become an industry standard. So 10 years ago or whatever, if you wanted like something like Unreal, it'd be like $500,000 to be able to get a license for it. And Unity came out and provided a really strong package. If you become good at Unity, at C# or JavaScript, that'll be really, really helpful. Are you looking like programming or art
I am in program and software development up there.
Okay,
So
cool.
like, we're learning JavaScript.
Okay,
and that
sweet.
Stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, Unity is probably the best way to go just right off the bat, particularly if you're already in the like CSE. There's so many YouTube videos. And the other cool thing, back to the sort of rapid prototyping and Vibreel stuff, is the Unity Asset Store's got tons of free stuff. So don't be afraid to just take all that free stuff and put it into your game as you're learning. It saves you a lot of time. You may or may not want to use it in a final product. I mean, who knows? Yeah. Flappy Bird made a lot of money and saw how that went. But yeah, definitely hands down Unity. And then if you're starting to look into like the art and animation side, Blender and ZBrush are good. There's a student version of Maya that's decent, but it's watermarked. So if you make stuff in the student version, you like can't use it in commercial products unless they've changed that recently. But I don't think they have, which is I think kind of sketchy. But I don't own Autodesk, so it's not up to me.
Okay, so right now I have a Game Maker 1.4 because it was free. Would you like recommend that as well, or like just Unity and the other stuff?
Oh no, I mean Game Maker's fine. There's a lot of cool Game Maker games. The only thing with with Game Maker, you're going to be a little restricted in some of the stuff that you can create. But as a new student, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I'm also a big fan of art from adversity. So if you have a very limited sort of palette to work from, then that'll help condense and focus your idea. I think a lot of times in our community, we'll see people will download Unity with these like grand ambitions, and then they realize like, oh, this is a really difficult thing. So yeah, I think Game Maker's perfectly fine. If you're already in that environment and fooling around with stuff, then yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've been trying to I've been having a little bit of trouble with art.
Focuses on this idea of violence and the idea that there is a positive correlation between seeing any sort of violence in any context and then replicating that in real life. And granted, while we don't understand completely the nature of that relationship, we are getting more and more studies now that are showing that this is way too simple to describe what's actually going on, right? We have kind of another version of the same thing. There are several books out. I don't want to call this guy out because I think his heart is absolutely in the right place and he's doing good work, but Dave Grossman, for example, he worked with the military, and this is where his perspective comes from. And so, of course, he sees how games have been used in a very specific way to train people for a specific thing, which is combat. And he's writing from this perspective, but he's also kind of driven a lot of the way that games are talked about in media. So, it's a stages sort of thing. We're going to get out of it. And that's what makes it so exciting about this stuff is that, once we can push past this kind of fear, it's going to explode. It's going to be amazing.
No, I agree. If you look at games compared to other mediums, like at best maybe 40 years of sort of strong gaming industry. Movies are over 100. Books are thousands. The common word is tens of thousands of years old. Music's even probably older than that. So we're just at the beginning of our life cycle on what a game can do. And we're just beginning to see games that are trying new things and games that can only exist as games. I always pull out The Witness as one of those games. Like that is a experience that can only exist as a video game. It cannot be a book. It cannot be a movie. It can't be a game where you sit around. Like, it's amazing.
Even something like Spec Ops: The Line, though.
Spec Ops.
This is a game that falls into the genre that is kind of blamed for making our kids violent. Supposedly, it's a military first-person shooter, but through this form, through the genre, it
delivers a really complex, nuanced critique of war.
Yeah.
And so it's just not that simple. It's not that simple as the games make our kids violent.
Right. Well, I think we've got time for one more question, and then we'll cut it.
Okay, so next summer, Ready Player One is going to be coming out.
It is.
And it's going to depict Columbus as basically the new future hub of video gaming.
It is.
So I'm just curious to hear your perspective on if you think that's something that can be capitalized on.
So I think that's a great wrap-up question. I'm actually on a working group with a variety of city officials to try to get a premiere of Ready Player One to Columbus, featuring Ernest Cline and Steven Spielberg. Now, we don't have anything committed, and then nothing's out there. We're trying to work with Warner Brothers to do that. And around that, if we could do something like that and make it like a Hollywood-ish affair just for one night, if we close down some streets and have it be cool. We've talked about getting game and VR companies to be able to showcase in the lobby, so as people are going in, they can experience these virtual reality things. I just had a conversation earlier this week with a news publication on creating a series of fake news articles about how Columbus is propelling into this future, based around that city and that system that they've made. So there are people talking about it, and I think it's really exciting. And the original word on the street was that Columbus was going to be cut from the movie. That it was going to be cut from the script. And so when the trailer came out and like the first lines were, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, a lot of people kind of lost it because, it's pretty rare that Columbus is depicted in any form at all, let alone in a Steven Spielberg movie. So, I really hope we can get something in Columbus. And if we do, we're going to try to have as much fanfare around it as we can.
Excellent.
Sweet. Well, thank you all. I'm getting shooed off the stage, but I really appreciate your time, and I'll be around all day if you want to talk.